Hello everyone. Hello everyone to second conversation in our production course. We're starting a little bit earlier. Oh well, no, actually we're starting right on time. No, I still will give it a couple of minutes just to check up that everything works. And I see there is a couple of people in chat. Please let me know if you can hear me well. And once we make sure that you are, I will be starting. And I probably will turn on the video because I still have this flickering issue. Like, hello guys. We can hear you very well. Hello. So, yeah. Well, again, welcome. And just for the courtesy, you can see me here. Hello guys. I will need to show you the full screen, so I'm just to say hello. And then I will turn off this screen so we can really concentrate the attention on the primary screen, you know, like, because we have a lot of things to discuss today, and they are partially boring. I mean, like, as we discussed, the streams are not for pure entertainment. I started this production course specifically to organize valuable material, as I believe. Again, because I've been asked this a couple of times through the last week about the way I'm telling about anything, about how I share experience and materials. Very simple explanation. I don't believe in silver bullets in video game development. I don't really think. Well, let me very quickly before we start answer that, and then I would need to make some changes on the stream because I have a recommended bitrate over here. Right. So yeah. Give me just a second, because I will put it as we're setting up. All right. And yeah, while I'm doing these things, I mean, like, I will still make this comment of I don't believe that there is a silver bullet or a unique set of knowledge or skills that can make you successful or like significantly increase your chances or provide you with one singular way to work on all of the games possible. I think that this is impossible in general as a task. But what we can, and I should be back now, or not. Yeah, so I changed the bitrate. Sorry, I had to reload it quickly. And the way we're doing this is, as I strongly believe is the right approach, and I used it in the world building before, is that I'm trying to share the way of thinking. I'm trying to share rather an approach and the methodology of and number of steps and hints that can allow you to build your own unique personal context with those knowledge and hints and skills that would be applicable for your specific development and your specific life situation. This is why it's all done in that way. And coming back to course and actually beginning, because like I think we should. We are at the week 2 today. We had an introduction. We had like the stage 1, how you start, initial team composition, team gathering, defining the game, and prototyping being done last week. You can find it on my channel and watch it if you have missed it and if you want it. And today we're going into the specifically planning the vertical slice as a first stage of the development. And we will structure it in a way where our subjects that we're discussing today is a concept, the first draft, where we discuss how you make the first extraction of the concept, what's the purpose of the concept really, and how do you use it in production, defining the vertical slice part that you would be working at, how to plan it all, like this whole thing, and what's the good approach, again in my opinion on a specific example of the story-based game for PC and consoles, vertical slice document, a short discussion about the pipelines in general, because surprisingly I've been asked by few people as well about if I can go a little bit more deliberately in how the pipeline works and what the pipelines are, and some people put very different type of meanings into this word, sometimes overcomplicating it, sometimes making it way too simple. Deconstruction methodologies, deducing larger ambiguous tasks to manageable tasks, why it is important, why you want to a little bit overanalyze the decomposition at the early stages, why it's helpful from the point of view of the pipelines, and why you won't really get an optimal way of development if you would not get through the stage, and will not be able to build effective inventory and qualification and quantification of what you're doing. Stages for vertical slice, timeload estimation, example of budget vertical slice plan. So we'll go for that. Again, like we will be using this general board for Miro with a bunch of stickers like we did the last time. And think about it like as like scripts, like grips. I mean, like the notes and stuff, like, and this is a helpful board just to keep all of the thinking organized and in one place. And what I want to start is that I want to start where we stopped last time. I mean, like, and again, a little bit of a disclaimer. I would be leading this from the position of designer. It's easier for me, but sometimes I will change my hat to the way of thinking of art or engineering or like other professions for mere examples to elaborate on some of the situations. And so, shall we start, right? We stopped at the part where you stopped prototyping, you defined the game, you pretty much understand your team, right? Like this is the beginning, the start of it. And we currently at the stage of where you have a lots of notes and what a lot of people call design document of a weird definition to this point. I will explain why a little bit later. Not very functional, and again, people put in it like a lot of meanings. And my big issue with what people call design documents at this point is it's not really design. It's not design, or it's at the best it's very partial about the design. In most of the cases, it's a codec book in a tabletop, meaning about everything that exists in the game and about everything that the person and designer actually came up with. And people think differently. People like think, so let's say we have design idea, right? I mean, like it's a document of design idea. That's the best definition. I'll show you an example. For all of the steps on top, those are the didactic materials we're gonna be using one way or another. So we have design idea document, like I think it's the better way to think about it. You have a bunch of notes and you probably have some initial prototyping. As we discussed last time, it's important to be at the stage where you more or less understand who is available as a resource in your team, including yourself, how exactly those resources are available, who's taking money, who's not taking money, participating as maybe owners. It really depends on the team. How much everyone has from the point of view of time they would want to dedicate on this process. If you have design idea document, it means that you more or less vaguely understand what kind of games you have. a bunch of notes probably describe some of the things you intellectually and mentally and temperament-wise you're strong naturally. Like some people describe characters more, some people describe locations, so people do level design, maps and small sketches. So you have some of those initial things. And initial prototyping is important because you probably at this point you more or less understand what kind of an engine you would be using, or you're writing an engine. And again, for the simplicity, I will presume Unreal Engine everywhere here because I've been developing with Unreal for 15 years in different capacities, and it's just simple for me to exemplify Unreal in general as a platform of choice. But again, disclaimer, can be Unity, can be Godot, can be your own engine, can be whatever software. It's not important. I mean, like, what's important for us here is that you have this basic idea, right? I mean, like, and this descriptor, right? I mean, like, I really want to just first just go to an exact example, and I would be showing some of the stuff I'm currently worked before, or been doing for someone, and I cleaned it up. No one would be really against it. I mean, like, and let's just presume that this Bloodlines Dynasties currently rule set for the tabletop game is my design document. It's not perfect, and I will show you why. It starts with an introduction because, like, I'm really into the literature. It's written by the writer. I'm making like specific exposure just to get people involved. I'm using a specific mechanic of the storytelling and narrative, which is effectively I'm telling the story through the bits, and I'm leaving a lot for people's imagination, which is often reflecting in some of my practices, like using timelines and so on. Not a lot of people do that. Some people do that. Other people just write the actual full story or a synopsis, and I'm just creating the context of existing reality with a bunch of descriptors, and then move down to fractions and characters and stuff that they use as weapons and objects, and then putting this into the story. Again, I'm showing this as an example of not a perfect document, which is highly reflective by someone who has specific pluses and minuses, just specific temperament and specific approaches to tackle one or other issue. And depending from, again, the person who writes that, the team composition, and see, this is like absolutely unnecessary literary part, right? You know, like over here. And I'm sorry, I need to make a short pause over here. Hello, sorry, I'm streaming. I'll call you back in an hour and a half probably. I mean, like, I need to. I think, yeah, sure. Talk to you. Bye. Sorry. And then go to specific game elements, and those game elements will be quite different depending from how I do that, and depending from your specific design affiliations. All of the designers are different as well, and they use various approaches. Your document would be more convenient for different aspects and not convenient for other specific aspects. And by that I mean that this document is, for example, is very good for using material for presentations, using material for external stuff, just atmospherically immerse people into the world we're doing stuff at. It's by all means, it's not perfect functionally, and for the Dynasty specifically, there is another 500 pages document, you know, like, which is dealing with all of those issues. But this is what I'm using, for example, and this is like how it's starting. And since this is a board game, you know, like, then it goes into the general rules and stuff and yada yada, right? I mean, like, and this document is also, but it's not very convenient at the same time for art and engineering, for example. While there are design documents that would be written by much more organized people than myself, initially that would provide less exposure into the world, dedicate 100% time into the mechanics, and make it more usable and functional by art, for example, and not very usable by engineering at the same time. and not usable at all by marketing people or people who want to involve people community-wise into that. And that's absolutely normal. It's normal to have your first version to be, well, you see I have like a bunch of characters being described with all their characteristics, you know, like and stuff and things. And it's absolutely normal to have it like this specific way, because you will be rewriting the things that you're writing for many times before you get to functional documentation, because everything that you write for the first time is something that will be repurposed for specific functional use at the different parts of the pipeline, and you need to understand that. You need to be totally fine about it. And we'll go for this partially today. So another comment that I really wanted to make here, I do think that having design document idea and design idea document, if you will, is also much more beneficial in advance of the first iteration of concept than start with actual concept and then go into design documentation, for a couple of reasons. Because if you have defined the field, as we discussed this before, and you build this mental and intellectual feeling of what kind of the environment you're building things at, you can then extract from this existing description something into the concept more consciously than if you will get into the concept and start using a lot of conjuncture-based data to do something which is not initially connected to the vision of the author and the vision of the design of the project. I think it just makes more sense. It's not that super relevant and super essential, but I think that once you start here, I mean, like, it's better to have design like more in a vast field, like let's say like design in lore context, some tryouts of prototype wise where people been discussing this thing just in general and trying things out. Some basic prototyping, and in general just first approaches in the tryouts, because like by that way you develop the feeling of what you're about to do, and you start to develop initial hypothesis based on to the actual facts, not again someone else's opinion. So tryouts and hypothesis. It will make sense in just about a second of a little bit more of because like we'll use the magic of arrows and connecting things together. So while you have that, right, you know, like it's much better to go from this initial thinking, you know, like into like a multifaceted perspective, proving by a bunch of different tryouts, to then start condensing this into your first initial concept, which would be based on already more data and more vision from the different people with different disciplines. So, and this is the point where, so like think about it this way: you can go from bottom up, you can go from up down, you know, like, and there are two very different approaches. It makes sense. There's none of them are perfect, but I think that boiling things down in general often is just more productive when you try to make something which would be the summarized core basis and then expand into a larger system. So here we would say the initial concept, where you sit together and you go from this large document to something which would be 15 pages. Now, sorry for English here. It's a lot of material I've been preparing and trying out. I mean, like, so that was original in Russian. I auto-translated some of the blocks. Some of the lexics would be bullshit lexics, but I will stipulate on that. So Concept is effectively no bullshit document. It's your first no bullshit document you need to build down, like to start working on something which is not set in stone at this. It's not set in stone at this point, but it's really a kind of definitive first approach that will be changing over time to get into something which is really set in stone. And the concept is something that you will be showing to other people. And it's a high-level document which is effectively is squeezed down from a lot of other documents you have internally in production for a couple of reasons, because mostly people you would be talking externally and new members of the team, again, they would not want to read all of the stuff that you have internally in production. People don't like to read things which are relevant to them, and you kind of can make them, which is an asshole move. Sometimes you have to, and a good check if people are indeed and genuinely interested into your project. And I've been doing that, but you still need to preserve this pipeline when you have a general concept which allows everyone to read these 10 pages and understand what this whole gig is about, right? In the concept, depending from the style, goes also in a bunch of categories. Now, there is also the general thesis. It should be substantial for people to read through this for what it is. Read basic gameplay explanation, which will identify your key 3 to 4 features and the stuff that you want to do in a priority in a game. Game modes, if you want to do that, gameplay loop a little bit above. Game world and setting, right? For setting, I'm using the part from the game design document, which again tells the story in bits, giving a little bit of space for imagination. And then we're going to very specific data after like the bosses and characters and skills and recurrent elements that we're gonna have there. And like when you do the concept as well, a lot of potential publishers or partners or people who would look at this, they will presume that those key elements are like 100% in the game. So that's when you at the later stages, when this is reiterated a number of times, it should be that. I also have a plot synopsis here of basically what the story we're telling, like on through the 8 chapters. Talk a little bit about similar games. So it's like Uncharted, Deus Ex Human Revolution, mission structure, multiplayer mode, secret world, videos and stuff, conspirological gig, right? And I'm talking about like development parameters and here I'm just using my experience. Here, based on the previous knowledge, I'm boiling this down into something which again through the course of the production will change about 3 times. First, when you enter into the vertical slice. Second, when you finish the vertical slice. The third one, when you finalize the parameters of the development based on your available resources, partnerships, and your potential route to the market. So it will change. But I need to have this first initial estimation and I'm basically saying the terms of development 26 months plus 6 months separate. Vertical slice is SKU. I'm not lying to my partners. I'm saying that pre-production results probably are not the part of the major cycle of development. It really influences on the team composition. Gonna be on the timeline at different parts of the development. Gonna be from 10 to 50 people. Plus graphics outsourcing. Gonna use that. Development budget is roughly estimated like as a 2.5 million per platform, 600,000 for the vertical slice. Average size A+ game in Western understanding. Can be any numbers really, like we can take a much more simple example for 10 months of development and say that this is like a 500,000 game, whatever, like one of the things I want to do later after we went through 5 or 6 talks. I want you guys to effectively send me some of the ideas we can disassemble as an examples on a high level through the methodologies we're discussing. Technology in the development schedule, right? I mean, like, and this is your, again, kind of a North Star of initial concept is something you can lean at when you plan everything else. and it's based on your larger understanding of the project. And I would say again, it's more of a feeling than understanding at this point. And I think that this is an important remark, right? You know, like it's like at this stage, initial concept of it's more of a feeling, than anything else. But you need to have it to start working with something. And the way you start to work with something is that once you identify the story and the plot, you need to define the vertical slice. I will be closing the steps because that would be much easier. And now we're getting into the space of actual methodologies and of identification of the vertical slice. And again, for people who are new or who are not familiar with this term for some reason, while I partially think that a bit of my, I don't know, purpose in this industry to tell people about vertical slice for the last 15 years, from 25 years of career in video game development, because so many people ignore that. But yeah, vertical slice is 5 or 10% of content of your future game in about 80% of quality. Why it is important to have it? Important to have it because you want to have an internal benchmark for the team. You want to have the benchmark for all the further calculation of in a specific quality of specific features and specific elements which have been approved after the vertical slice. And this is the real data once you have it, not hypothetical. You want to have it to show it to whoever externally, and that can be community, that can be publishers, can be anywhere else, and you can basically say that, look, this is pretty much how it's gonna be. In 2 years, a little bit better, probably, but this is how it's gonna be from the point of view of gameplay and graphic fidelity and the story, if you have one, and a game loop, but it's gonna be 10-20 times bigger. And what we're currently we're looking to scale this to make it a full game, full product. And this conversation is at large, it's much more effective than just get into the stipulations. So what you need to do at this stage is that you want to use initial concept and this whole block. I don't know how to show it properly. I mean, like, I'll probably just do it this way, like I did this, right? I think it makes sense. And you want to make an extract to vertical slice definition. Vertical slice definition. Not the definition. And first thing you need to start thinking about is which part of the game you're taking for the vertical slice. Now, it shouldn't be the actual very beginning, because it's not. It's a little bit dull. It's not containing most of the features that you probably want to show from the point of view of core mechanics and what signifies your game and makes it different from other games. It shouldn't be at the very end, because like the very end, it's probably a pinnacle story, a lot of the things going on, too many characters, too much work, a lot of unique elements which are not repeatable, extremely hard, way too expensive, not to really justify it. So good thinking is, I think, end of the first act, beginning of the second act of the game. Again, sorry for using story games as an example. It's much more easier for me. If this is a gameplay based game, like a pure gameplay, no story, just pure raw gameplay fun, you want to take an element where you are showing the existence of the overall and full core loop of the gameplay. So I've been making this example before. If you are building an RPG, you want to actually tackle this a little bit differently as well. You want to take a room, maybe generated location. You want to give non-existing into the final game interface for the everyone who would try the demo, and you want to give an opportunity for the person who tests your build to pick the class, immediately distribute 10-20 skills or skill points to start tackle around the builds, give them some initial ready inventory with different quality of the items, and allow them to construct unique builds, send them into the room and start sending enemies at the character with a raising complexity and ability to pause the game and tweak your build for more efficiency. So it's more of an approach of the mini game every time you're building something which is focused at the mechanic. When it's about the story, it's about audio, visual exposure and representation. And story-wise, indeed, it makes sense to do something at the end of the first act, beginning of the second act, something along those lines. I'm taking an example of the document I did for the vertical slice definition from another game, but it's not really important what's written there, right? I mean, like it's more important to show how it's structured. And so it's structured basically like a director's and camera script sometimes for the movies functionally. So you try to write functional text. You mark text differently. You write about the cutscenes, and you show cutscenes as a different type of the entity because they would use the different type of pipeline. It's a content-heavy game. The game this is from back in the day, from 2015, is a third-person adventure shooter thing. It's a heavy story element, and again, you're making this functional. So you when to explain and to elaborate on this a little bit, you describe the whole playing of in a detail, in so much detail you can explain. So a main character goes into location after the cutscene. There's a description of the location, and then there's a gameplay focus on what's going on and what we're showing in this specific part of the game. And I also and then if there are enemies, then there are enemies, and if there are gameplay elements and features which we are now pinning to specific exposure, then they are as well. And I always try to make these little maps for the future level design because they're not final, but they pretty much represent of what we're showing over here. And then I have an additional text for the specific walkthrough, which effectively explains what character and what player does in every minute, and then it goes to the next dialogue that happens over the intercom, and then they go into the second scene, and then they go for the third scene, and you detail this as much as possible, because functional detailization of the vertical slice document in this specific format will be essential, because you will be deconstructing this document a lot. Like this is a point where people don't really like the deconstruction and don't really like to go deeply into that, and this is exactly the reason why people cannot extract enough data to start pouring this data into the pipelines, build pipelines efficiently, and miss a lot of the things that will return later and will bite them by the ass and be much more expensive, because like fixing anything in a linear production is extremely hard. It's extremely expensive, and you need to try to presume how to attack most of the issues at the pre-production stage. And so you get the idea of this, right? You know, it's a director script more or less, and it's written that in a way that it would be looked upon by a whole bunch of a different type of disciplines in the development team now and later. And by that I mean designers, level designers, artists, and voiceover specialists, and people in animation, and art modeling people, and so on and so on and so on. And just to start making an example of this, like there are different stages of decomposition by different type of people, but everything starts with initial decomposition in general. And to provide additional data, initial decomposition, that falls into a few categories. It's 3 as usually, because we or more depending from the complexity of the game, and that would be in this case content decomposition, functional decomposition, and I'll start with these two because that would be easier to explain. And functional decomposition, and then actually pipeline decomposition, the production decomposition per se. Which is the one of the most exciting parts of this extremely boring talk about how do you structure production properly. We're basically having the factory conversation right now. Again, a lot of people just despise this talk. They're not interested. They consider it to be dull, and boring. But we love that shit, and because we love that shit, we're gonna make great games, aren't we? Pipeline optimization. And I will start with the content decomposition. So I'll just make a very simple example, and I produce some of the materials in the AI DaVinci, like just to start exemplifying stuff. So let's say you have like this on the streets to the alley section, which has like this map as well, and you have a person who works with you who's an art, and you give those materials and those descriptors to the person, and basically saying that, look, can you just take this walkthrough part and write the storyboard for this section of the game? And he says yes, and he starts drawing, something like that, right? He goes like, all right, like what we have, it's a game in a dark noir detective style, mixed with supernatural, happening in as Texas, happening into a bunch of dark alleys into the underworld of criminals and demons and whoever fighting for human souls, yada yada, all that stuff, right? And art stylistic of the project is identified as something which is looking at some of the specific references, and he builds the storyboard, which is basically full of pictures like that. It's AI. It's more fancy than you would see it in the production. It shouldn't be that, but an important part of this exercise is that it goes from the text and action happening in those sets to, to level design, approximate approach, first approach, and first initial approximation, and then we're doing this content appraisal and estimation, and for that we need to have the storyboard, because we need to decompose it to specific objects that we will set into our inventory list. And by these two pictures, what I mean, it's very simple. It's like you look at this and you're like, all right, this picture looks fine. To build it, we need like house type 1, house type 2, house type 3. That's type 2. Probably we can make this house with 4 different facades to same on the performance. You discuss it internally later. I mean, like, but at this point, it's effectively you just enumerate the objects. You say that a bunch of different suitcases and the staircases, probably some graffitis, some of the signs. That's probably a material on the road, the pavement. So all of the nouns, all of the objects that comprise the scene, you need to decompose it to specific props, and you need to split it into the different groups of the complexity. The same goes here. You're like, pavement and the street lamp, and probably with a couple of types of the street lamp, It makes sense to think from the point of view of shots as well. So in what I mean here is that you'll have things which always would be close to you in your vicinity. You will have things in the middle perspective. You will have things far away, and all of them can be done differently with a little bit different approach. Again, later on it. We also know that we will have the main character, and we also know that there is at least one type of the enemy. In this case, it's we're taking as a basis a zombie-like guy in a gas mask serving demons, trying to steal, hang out, and not attract enough attention, catching people, killing people, all that shit, right? You know, like it's not of the essence. It's an enemy. It's your typical basic NPC which comprises in the groups, uses different enemies, using different type of guns, and you can meet them around all of the game. So these are the examples of the content. So it's a props content based on description, the level design, some of the character examples and the character content, and those are the content positions. We'll get to this very soon. And that goes like over here, that the content decomposition, and just again for making this example particular, I would say that we have decomposed this to few types of assets that will become a part of our inventory. So with this asset decomposition part, again, per position, not how they produce, because like this is what we're gonna be doing next. And we're like saying that there are chars. We know chars. We know that there are landmarks, some unique objects geographically. There are props, and let's say there are decals, whatever, right? Yeah, interior, exterior. You can split it in the way that you want. But what I would presume, and it's important, that you always preserve the idea of the complexity of production of specific assets, because it's important. It's important for all next steps we're going to be doing. Now we'll do the functional decomposition based on the text as well. And I presume that here you would look at the text, and designer will sit down together with an engineer, and they would do initial breakdown of what actually will be in the game based on what's described in this document, which again, it's a document that effectively is 10% of your 100%, but it needs to be in as much high quality as possible. And I presume that this conversation will end up into a feature list, as we call it, and but going a little bit more particular, we say that it would be core features, and that would be unique features, AI behavior, maybe it's quite unique for the specific game, I don't know. AI features per blocks, and then you have auxiliary mechanics. And when you split them, there are a bunch of different techniques over here, and these techniques are I don't know why it's connected by the arrow, but I'm actually too lazy to delete it. Actually, no, let's be again. But you need to in general, it's considered that you want to build your idea of any action in the game and any mechanism in the game from the point of view of their priority, and their priority often would be dictated by how much the game would not be working without them, and how much time they are repeated over the period of time. And so by that I mean that tier 1 features are the features that you cannot do anything without them. It's not functional, it's not playable, not the game, or maybe not game is not defining itself, game defeats its own purpose, just doesn't work, right? Tier 2 features are features that are almost mandatory. The game can exist without them, But if you will take them away, it means that you would need to fill so much space with something else that without this substitution it wouldn't make sense at all. And then there are tier 3 features or auxiliary features, which a good example would be mini games. And if this mini games happens 2 times over the whole the production cycle and you will take it away, it's like not like no one will notice, but it will not break the structural integrity of the game as a system. So you can really play around it. And if you are experienced, you can start initially tackle this element, pipeline optimization. If you are not, you need to start figuring out what the pipeline is and how the pipelines are structured. And at this point, we're not even talking about the game's pipeline. We're talking about pipelines that comprise the overall game pipeline. In many senses, your pipeline is defined initially by, as we discussed before in the first talk, your point where you start the whole of the development, resources that you have, your initial goal orientation of what kind of product you would like to get at the end of your pipeline, and your desire to build something that would optimally use your resources for maximum quality of the output at the end of the pipeline. Now, that's ideologically. If we're talking about functionally, then your pipeline consists of tools that you're using, resources that you're using, specialists that you're using, intermediate stages that define the quality, and if product is appropriate enough at this intermediate stages for the whole of the service of your pipeline, and for any additions or specific tweaks you would want to introduce to minimize some of the obvious risks if something doesn't work. Last one is optional, but to put it into the real example again, you're obviously building the game. We understand what kind of the game you're building. You basically, what you do is the vertical slice. You define the mini version of your game. It's a little bit more specific than that, but that's it should be definitive. Yes, it needs to be showing that it's expandable, it has scale, but the simple way to think about it, it's indeed it's a mini version of your game as per se. But to start thinking about like how do you specifically, what steps you are doing with resources, what you have for what specific stages that will come up the end result of as a great game you're building, you need to understand your resources, your tools, and for what exactly you do at what specific parts of the time that you are doing that. And I'm a little bit sorry to go that much on detail and put so much attention into this factor, but again, I strongly believe that a lot of people just don't really understand what the pipeline is, or they're taking this idea of the pipeline a little bit too mechanical, in a little bit too mechanical fashion, and this is why they do mistakes that otherwise can be avoided. It's a general inefficiency, and I don't like inefficiencies at all. I mean, like, inefficiencies really irritate me a lot. So 4 elements we would define here, and that's probably pipeline pre-optimization at this point. Is first of them would be tools. What are you using for development? As we defined, it's an Unreal Engine. Now I'm gonna show you the page. It's a magical one. And this page used to be one of my very large pains when I used to work in Epic, for one simple reason, because so many people would just refuse to acknowledge themselves to this information. Now it's an essential knowledge. You really need to. I would say that sometimes it even makes sense to go into this data retrospectively, and you want to go and look at some of the older pages to see how things been progressing and changing. But if you want to understand how engine been working, and what engine will demand from you from the point of view of the sequence of actions in various departments, it's here. It's for example, on a build pipeline, how to cook the build, how to build it, how to deploy it, right? I mean, like, what engine does, what's the name convention on the engine, what do you need to know, and how does this work specifically. Like, read about how your tools work. It's extremely important. I've been making this example so many times. Is that when we started to adopt Unreal Engine back to in Eastern Europe or CIS countries, in Ukraine specifically, because I've been working there for the first couple of years, it's been all the same issues. People would not read documentation. People would not understand the pipeline requirements and the internal pipeline technologies of the tools they're using. And it would be very simply put that when you are producing any art, you need to produce the 3D asset in FBX format. You need to import it into the engine. You need to import the diffuse texture by these specific parameters, and then you need to save it as a material, assign this as a material in the material editor as a basic material to this object that you have produced, your FBX, and then you would use a variety of other different materials to get the desirable result on that object that you are building. And that would be optimal pipeline, and that would influence on how you build things, because there are other pipelines that are not presumed by the use of Unreal Engine as the basic ones. For example, people would be building the 3D assets in your standard Maya or 3D Max format, and they would build a diffuse texture, and then they would use and build all of the other materials textures, like specular maps and parallax maps and a bunch of others. And the issue here is sometimes people would say that more is better, but when you're trying to build something optimal from the point of view of production, more often becomes a result of multiple issues. I would say more frequently than less. And you really need to cut down all of the redundancies, because before you go into the actual linear production, so you need to familiarize yourself with the pipeline of the tools you're gonna be using. Please do that. You're gonna save yourself so much hassle, so much issues, and it would really help you to understand how people who build engines, for example. And I would remind you again, Unreal Engines built by very smart people, extremely professional, which is also a curse and a bless sometimes, because like very smart technological people, they often think of that and presume that everyone else is as smart as they are, which is not the case, and that defines the threshold of adoption. But specifically for these cases and learning by mistakes, these people and people who help them write those descriptions of expectations of the pipelines for you to use, and descriptions of the tools that you gotta be using. And it's important to familiarize yourself with these things. So that goes for the tools, right? I mean, like there's also requirements. And requirements is something interesting. People are typically against this stuff. And I would say that the modern culture of development is not what it used to be. But I'm also saying this because I'm old and grumpy. And like as all of the old people do, I sometimes shout at the clouds as an old man. But still, I think that properly put requirements in the initial pipeline of optimization is something that gonna really help you. If you do understand, and you do understand at this stage, that you're gonna be developing for the multiple of platforms, and give me just a second again, because there are I turned everything off, but there are some urgent things I really need to answer, because like that's like something which is important to me. Wait. All right. So restrictions, right? Requirements and restrictions. and just understanding from the beginning that you would be developing in a specific environment and a specific goal orientation, and maybe you would have initial performance goals, and maybe you want to develop for not more than this specific graphic card for some reason. I don't know. Maybe like this is how you plan your strategy. Maybe you're developing for the consoles, and obviously we're all living into the modern world, and you do understand that some of your decisions will alienate some of the audiences and will attract some of the audiences, and you want to really think about how you do that, and that will influence a lot of things at the beginning of development. It will also ironically will affect your pipeline. So as soon as you can define regulations and the requirements, the better. You also need to, at the pipeline pre-optimization, to understand how rigid or flexible it is, and that really depends from risk factor. It depends from how much time you would want to develop the game, what is the basic vision, and what influence is dominant into the process of development, more or less. The first point here is for pipeline optimization. You want to. It's a little bit tricky one. It's a risk mitigation alternatives, and it's close to the previous one. But what I mean here is that once you do understand tools and restrictions, and restrictions are also associated with your resources and your goal orientation, and then you understand how much flexible you are not, and that also influences the risk mitigation factor in a meaning of that if you would, how much are you affected for cardinal changes over the process of your development? This is the question. Like, I can say you 100% that if you make yourself more flexible, even at the point of the pre-linear development and even later at the linear development, if you're considering large risk mitigation factor, like working with someone who would go to a video show conference, come back and provide you with the feedback that will basically tell you that you need to change your game drastically, right? Can that happen? And if it will, how much it will affect you? The more risks you put in like this, the more expensive and non-optimal it will become. But it actually would be, you need to consider your risk as a factor. And it will get a little bit more apparent later, because we're getting into, I would say, the most interesting part, which we will just work together in, and this is the composition sheet and inventory. And I would, and there are different ways to approach this, right? I mean, like, I would use what considered to be more or less, again, common industry knowledge optimal, and it goes through the conversation and decomposition participants of all of the disciplines. And by that, what I mean, so I'll start like with the character, because NPC character, because it's probably the most intuitive way to go into that. And let's say you have a character, right? And at this point, we do understand that this character is described. It's a description. Description is here. I mean, and by this factor of this descriptions being here, we know that it also consists, in some sense, by logics, because description is often, and again, I'm going from the design, and that would be design and narrative. Like, let's put it, logics and the backstory, logics and lore, a little bit easier. Function, content, and that would be art. We know that there is content, model, textures, animations, etc., right? We know that there is also mechanics associated with the logics and behavior, and it's like features, action, etc. Sounds kind of logical, but this is where we're getting into a very interesting ground where in reality people from art people from art, design, and engineering, again, they don't really understand each other to the point where you expect they would understand each other. And because of that, you need to go through these exercises where we're taking our guy and we call his name is the Dredge. And we're going through the basic description of which goes for in the form of a free narrative brief, right? You know, like we it's a page description, let's say, and we go, there is like times ago human souls, you know, like being trapped into I'll make it a bit more simple for you. Don't worry, I don't want to write the whole page. So we did that. I mean, like, and we did that here. Did it work? Yeah. The entrapped, and that's like the lower part, and then they go for like whatever. They can be encountered in one or groups. Weak enemies. Use guns and machine guns. I was just making shit up, you know, like it's not important, right? They have no special skills, but they can be led by Alpha Dredge, who influenced that stuff, and they I don't know, can use covers, and then they can get very angry and explode next to character. That's enough for the explanation. And that's design, right? I mean, like, but these are like descriptors. They're all around the place, and they are not specifically useful for anyone at the team at this point, because they are not really telling specific things, and it cannot be put in the production in this way. So we need to put it into the functional design first. So we need designer to be able to think function and to think, and this is why I'm telling for years at this point. So the technical artists, and we need to have technical designers and functional designers in the first point, because otherwise it all becomes a mess and people just don't understand each other. And we need to turn it into the actual logical things in the forms of briefs. As I said, this times ago, soul being trapped, like for design and narrative, what does this mean? Probably some descriptors. We presume that there is a lore in the game, so maybe there are some objects with text and dialogue, and we effectively just go through like everything that can be a functional element related to these things that we want to relay into the game world, which are related to the specific characters, can be encountered in one of the groups. Now, it's an interesting one. It means that the assumption that they can work in the groups presume that there is a group intellect. And that means that, just logically, that they behave differently alone and in groups. And that probably would be a just assumption. Weak enemies use guns and machine guns. It means that a whole bunch of things from the point of view of design. It means that they can use various objects. I would leave it like here. I have no special skills. Okay, there are skills in the game, guys. Can be led by Alpha Dredge. That's again group intellect. Proximity effects, etc. Though at this point I'm doing what engineers would do. can use covers of in active interaction with environment, interaction with environments, can get very angry and explode of explosion mechanic. And that goes with explanation, and now that goes to art, right? And when it goes to art person starts to think about the things that design came up with very differently. It's like going about like the first element, like descriptors. They're like, okay, that's easy. That's some objects with textures. And probably there's conversation on how exactly do you want that to be expressed through what mediums and stuff, and they come up with a conclusion of how the specific characters should be presented into the world of mediums, how lore works in general. Can be encountered in one or in groups. That's not really relevant for art, except this is a very experienced art, and then they would talk again with the engineering and the design. And the question here would be like with many other various questions: is that behavior visually very different from when they do things alone? And are the ways that we show an effect of the group to the player somehow? With some special effects, with some UI, UX, probably shoot, maybe with some animations. And the question, like here and in many other cases, would be auxiliary content. And can use various objects and the guns and the machine guns. That's important question. Important animation question. Important animation. Oh shit! Sorry. Oh, for God's sake, dude, come on. Oh, sorry. Right. Animation. How this thing's called? Slots. Animation. Attachment modules. Special effects. SFX, VFX, dependencies, and so on. Skills in the game. Also, again, like question about how we visualize it. Question on visualization, whatever. So you kind of get it, right? Covers are like additional animation set. And so on. It's get even more trickier when it get to an engineer, because like engineer looks into this whole gig and they start to asking even more questions and making even more assumption based on what being described through general description, design and narrative, art components, and now it's in the hands of the function. And so we basically are saying that this is irrelevant for engineers. Like really, well, I mean, unless there is something specific, for the way you show it and the way you communicate, and this is the first question for all of this description, where engineers are like, so alright, so the character has inventory if there are objects for lore and stuff like that, right? Then it goes to weak enemies and can be encountered in one of the groups. A whole variety of questions of AI behavior, nav mesh, navigation mesh, comms, in general, of proximity, triggers and effects, etc. Inventory are available for NPC as well. PC as well. Probably we'll ask a bunch of questions about the guns, because this is the point where we're talking about them, and we started with the character. About like, would it be ballistics or the instigate, like, or whatever, just questions. this game is all about the questions, because you want everyone to ask as much questions as possible for anything that was missed or will be missed in general. And each feature and your each entity like character is effectively is a feature, gets into those descriptions, and then at some point you finalize all of the things associated as a various form of dependencies for a character named Dredge to function properly into the vertical slice, and you build the dependency chart. I mean, like you build like the dependencies, where you have like Dredge, who is dependent from aspect 1, 2, 3, you get it. And those aspects might be dependent from each other as well, so they can be interconnected in all of the variety of ways. And often, and we will get to this very soon, those elements would be produced at the different elements of the pipeline at different parts of your production. So you cannot really effectively do any animations before you get the model and before you get the skeleton being done and the rigging's been done. So you have dependencies, and at the end of the day, because this is what we're looking here for the estimate of one position in principle, you will have something like again, Dredge character, model, textures, animations, VFX, associated VFX, associated SFX, features, and then you will have integration, and then you will have tests, and then you will have tweaks and polishing, and then you will have final integration into the build, mention build, ready, prod ready, right? And what you want to get here is an information of you want to have like a singular position effort estimation, and let's say that the model will be 120 hours, texture would be 40, animations would be all of the block of the animations would be 160 because it's a complex character. I don't know. VFX would be like a 4 effects, like 10 hours, which is 40 hours, and sound would be like if we're doing this specifically for this one character, and we're not talking about voiceover, because that would probably be voiceover, but we're talking about just the SFX, would be another 20 hours. The features associated would be another 80 hours, maybe, you know, like, I don't know, well, actually it's more, it's about 240, and let's keep it real. Integration is quick, that's at 10 hours with all the setups. If people who are using the tools know what they're doing. Testing is probably about additional 20 hours for all of the various situations that we have discussed, and polishing is another week, you know, like by one person, with final integration being the same 10 hours. So what you will see is that most probably you'll get upset at this point, because it would take 700 hours for simple NPC characters to be implemented into a game. And just, you know, like if you're wondering, one key NPC, if you're doing just that, being spreads, it's a 4.5 months of one person. It's not one person though, I mean, like, but again, when you first do that for one position, this is an upsetting number. So what you're gonna do next is that you want to understand that effective and optimal works when you have number of things like this is a Dredge character, right? You know, like, and you gonna say that you will have overall 10 NPCs. These estimations also help you to keep things real, you know, like it's not like you when you do those things and when you show all of these elements, you kind of can cut this bullshit conversation when someone goes for like, oh, my neighbor's son is a modeler, he can make this model, and he showed me in Roblox for 2 days, right? Well, fuck, I mean, like, if you do shit for the 2 days, you get the Roblox character who can be used only in a lame context, and that's made by children for children, and we're building a different context game. It's much more complex, but you need to be able to show all this stuff. And I'm meeting here a whole bunch of things Because like, and you need to understand. So I'm simplifying. So animation, for example, what's the animation? And this is the questions when you need to start asking yourself where you can optimize things. You need to know how they work. I'll take an animation as example. So you have 10 NPCs, and 6 of them are 4 of them I need to be careful from the point of equality here. 4 of them are male and 4 female and 2 unique. They are monster animalistic, let's put it this way. And it kind of helps you from the point of view, because like if we'll discuss pipeline, animation pipeline, animation pipeline, Jesus, animation pipeline. Again, a bit simplified, but I really hate it when they stick. So let me put it here. So we go for like there is a model, and then there is a skeleton, and there is rigging, and then there is let's say you do mocap. It would be easier for me to presume that would be motion capture animations, and then you need to clean up mocap animations from twitching and from all of the negative artifacts, and then you make all that work together, kind of, and then something is not, and then you're fixing things up, because like those 4 things is what you will be doing in game development most. If you think it's kind of fun, and then think about this statement, it kind of works. And we would say that for one character, like this is exactly this 160 hours and the model is ready. You do not do it before, but then you start to look at the things that you can optimize here, and you start thinking about your project as the larger entity with an understanding of how your element structured, how you basically large feature structured, and how your production pipeline of one feature structured. You want to add to this equation an understanding of how each discipline specific pipeline is structured, to start putting this to a happy medium. And what I mean here is that, like I said, so we have 10 NPCs like over here, and they are like 4 male, 4 female, types, and 2 monsters, uniques. Let's put it uniques. What that means is that like you can, at this point, you can optimize use of the skeletons for male and female animations and cut the work twice on this specific element. Right? Makes sense, isn't it? You know, but it's people just do stupid shit all the time, and I cannot even stop enumerating where I had situations working with people who would basically say that each of our NPCs are unique ones, and they would literally just develop a separate skeleton and go again for all of these procedures from each of the characters. And sometimes it's not very obvious why people do that, because let's say you decided to save yourself time and you outsourced the full cycle of animation to 4 or 5 different places, and that means that they would produce things as they think fit, right? You know, and that will influence your stuff. And so this is the first element where you really save your work. You do same skeletons, and it means that you do the same riggings, and you really optimize on this one. And once you get to the mocap, you want to make this session once. You don't want to go to the studio 3 or 4 times. You want to make all of the characters. You want to make, or I mean, your animations are the same. It means that their parameters of these models, at least for 4 male and 4 female, are kind of same in between this 4 and 4. And that means that you need to produce only 1 male and 1 female, and probably these 2 uniques. So you need 4 instead of 10. and you write down all of the list of these animations, you do video references, and you go and you make mocap. And they would use the same models of the same dredge for all the male and dredge female for all the female. And then you would just replace models with other characters, and it would still work. It makes sense again. And you write down mocap once, and by that you're avoiding a lot of redundant overhead costs. But let's be realistic, you'll have at least one correction with the same studio, but that would be much less expensive. And so again, coming back here, like what are we doing is that we're doing like initial decomposing. We understand the individual cost in hours of one specific model without optimization, and then by using understanding of the specific pipelines, we're starting to optimize this into the larger picture by, at this point, beginning to think about the timeline. Because again, when you start building things in a specific time, in a specific order, and you're trying to comprise some of those elements to do them once instead of doing them every time, and then you save yourself a lot of time. If you, for example, you took these NPCs, right? And or no, not NPCs. Let's do stuff related to props. So we do props, and let's say like in the vertical slice you have how much? It's 8 locations like that, and you have them in a little bit different fashion. You have like that, and then there is like, I don't know. Let me quickly do that. DaVinci AI. I'd say I want to get tricky, a little bit tricky here, right? You know, like it's not advertisement of, but DaVinci is very cool, from much better than GPT and Midjourney in my opinion. Of North City Detective Supernatural Square Sunset. So let's say we end up somewhere here. So it's a larger screen. It's a prospect. It's a bunch of skyscrapers, and it's like sun is like that, right? You know, like, and I will put it here. So we have a situation like that, right? I mean, like when I start working on the props, I want to start and the grouping of props. I want to ask myself a question. What are they repeatable from the point of view of modeling? And how many materials are actually using? Like am I using for, like, tier 1 is, say, is complex. One's like car, it's a complex prop of like car 1, car 2, car 1, car 2. And then tier 2 is something more simple. It's like fridge, clocks, whatever, street lamp. Maybe it's a fairly complex. Maybe it's a complex street lamp. And that's like your basic props, like suitcase and jug and some texture materials like puddle, graffiti, whatever, right? I mean, like, I can separate it into groups, but you get the idea of this. And the question I'm gonna ask myself is, like, how much these objects would be repeatable? How many actual suitcases I need this for a picture to look variable in this specific art style? How different they would look depending from the lighting I'm using, and how much actual materials I would be using at those specific objects. Like, these are the questions I want to ask myself. And then after these questions, I will ask myself as well stuff like, what specific and tricky mechanics of using various approaches for optimization I can use to save on my performance, to save on actual work, and to save on the without too much compromising the quality. Like, maybe I should be making procedurally generated houses. I probably can. Depending from the camera I'm using, probably definitely can do that. And that means that I need to make a building set and start putting this in use. Can I use same model for the suitcases and use 4 various textures with the same material? Yeah, I can probably. I can do that as well. For materials I'm using, materials are expensive from the point of view of production, not just quality but also performance. And how many types of asphalt I will have in the game? How many type of pavements I have in the game? Probably not more than 2 or 3. And it doesn't make sense to use different for various locations, and even in the board of the vertical slice. I need to be smart about it. And so I will inventorize in this specific fashion. And like all of these things, thinking all of these approaches will end up into specific tasks and into specific inventory. And this specific inventory will look something like that. It will be the features of tier 1, tier 2, tier 2, tier 3, as we discuss. Tier 3, it would be content, it would be major characters, props, effects, whatever you do that, right? Like whatever you use from the point of view of toponymy, of and convenience, of like I would say props, and like it just, again, whatever works for you. And then it would be like additional stuff, like something that you cannot qualify to any of these groups. It would be like sounds and voiceover clips, and you would know in this inventory that each of those elements go deeper into the tier 1 as the specific 10 features. The specific 10 features comprised from the specific components. The specific components cost the specific amount of time, which we have optimized through the pipeline optimization because we're thinking about them in bulk, and this will influence how and when we produce them on the specific timeline. So I hope that this idea and this type of thinking, like, is something which is kind of apparent for you guys. And what we're gonna do here is that after you did all that, you move into the stage of creating, just put it this way, inventory, just features, feature set, content library, content leave estimation. It's a production. You also, at this point, you need to understand the cost of integrations, in general, associated with the pipeline, and pipeline and timeline understanding. Pipeline and timeline. Line and timeline. So what one's done? Now, what we want to do here at this point, I'll do it like here. I'm just lazy and I'm getting a little bit tired. So what we gonna do now is effectively I'm gonna show you how timeline works, and on an example which is a bit off, but I wasn't able to produce the better one. But we need to talk about this out. So when you understand what's produced when at what specific pages, this is from one of the projects I'm working currently, for consulting, like the whole gig. But the idea here, I want you to think about this number of tasks as something that we just discussed over here, with the logic that we just discussed over here. And let me tell you a story about this picture. So let's say we're talking about production of the same cycle for the character, which is in essence a mini game, right? So we're talking about the NPC Dredge, who communicates with the characters without the characters have proximity effect when they get together, and the group can use covers, can use variety of the guns, has inventory, probably has some additional voiceover and agency and representation into the game. You can read through a bunch of specific lore elements, and we want to make all of this real, right? Let's say that this first stage is what we have discussed. It's descriptions, tryouts, prototypes, and this is where everyone works. And we also produce the model over here, and we'll also start to produce functionality. It means that we're modeling and we're producing some content and producing some features, and design also works. Maybe they're doing some of the test and simulation prototypes to map out the mechanics and stuff. And all that jazz, right? Now, I want you to think about this block as animations that cannot start without this work being produced, and this work being produced, and this work being produced. And so this animation block is happening in this specific place only after these things are done. And that means that they are dependent from each other. It means that animation block dependent from the mechanic and from the content. And only after animation blocks done, we have this little bit of a part for the special effects and VFX, and then we have engine integration and test. And it cannot work otherwise. This is extremely important to understand. That's extremely important to comply with the fact that different people provide different efforts at the different parts of the pipeline development. And it really helps you when you start to get into the budget. Because if you will, when this thing, a game or whatever, entertainment, call it, when you looking at the picture and then you set yourself a little bit away and you want to look at it from the wider angle perspective, and you kind of see it as light and dark elements, and you see that something's filled and something's not. So idea here is that your budget estimations should be equal from the point of view of the flight spots, especially at the vertical slice, and especially when you have a larger degree of management of resources you are bringing in with your budget effort estimation. Because if we're talking about this vertical slice, and I would just take this specific effort, in this example I just made here, or the budget, where we again defined what the character is, how it communicates with the major character, and we know that we will have this bloodline game TL matrix, which would be 6 months, and we will split it into the stages because our timeline and our pipeline being optimized suggests the stages to be that, because this is how we work, because this is how we defined we're gonna produce this vertical slice. And we say that the first months will be pre-production, alpha and beta in the Polish. And again, I will quicken this up a little bit, but I would like to demonstrate some of the logics and methodology we're doing here. Again, your team has started with you, designer, right? And you have your pals who are one of them is an engineer, programmer, and one of them is an art person. Let's say you all a bit experienced, and you can do a whole bunch of things. You can wear different hats, right? And once you started, you're you are this company. You are this company. You're, let's say, started to work for a little bit of free time, and you do that for free in general. But since you're getting into the commercial stage, you have decided that you all will put some money together, and you will all pay each other 200 and 2500, whatever. So this is what goes for the budget that you pulled in together as people, and this is your company, and let's say it's 30 30 30, and you have 10% is up for all the people to upcome, and those are the resources that you would be spending anyway. You need to understand that there are always people in any budget, in any company, who are completely replaceable, owners of the company, founders of the company. Without them, the gig wouldn't work. And you see numbers starting to pile up because over the 6 months, you're already spending 45,000 for yourself. You might not spend as many if you have some savings and you think that this is stupid, but in reality, you should, because in that way, you show that you are a company, you put resources together, you pay salaries, including yourselves, and it's just how it's unwrapping, right? And by the pipeline that we've been discussing vaguely on a bunch of examples, you know that you would also need an animator, 100%. You would also need an VFX and SFX guy. Your programmer says that you would need the second programmer, another person, who would need to join at some of the tricky months that you have over here. Engineer junior. And let's say like all of you not sure about UI UX and you want to show them good, and you have UI UX, and you have a person who gonna make the cutscenes from the documents, you know, like we've been looking at, let's say cutscenes, since this is an Unreal Engine, it's like sequencer guy. And then there would be other expenses. This is a mocap, and you gotta buy some content auxiliary, and then content modification would be done by the art person, but he also thinks that, yeah, well, actually, you know, like I can use the help of the artist junior as well for the specific role. And you don't pay for an office, you work outside of the office system, you all remote, and that kind of suits you, and you're cool about it. And it's just not too overcomplicated. You have decided that these three people are actually doing a whole bunch of things, and part of these people, they're like temporary people, or they show up for some time, and you do not pay them in full until you secure larger funding with the vertical slice and whatever. And so with animator, like what you do is that you're like, all right, we cannot use the service of the animator before the month 3, because like we will not be able to produce the model, will not be able to produce the engineering features, we would not have the full understanding before it happens. So animation guy shows up pretty much here, and we pay him 5,000 for the full job monthly for the 3 months. VFX, SFX guy is the same thing, right? You know, like we don't really pay him. This is probably a one-time job where we just order like a set of animation effects for the person for like not last month, I think, like here for 3,000. And we know that our art person and our engineer person and maybe a designer, because he's functional, he would be able to work together with our guy to appoint them to the specific sockets and make sure that this works, and yada yada. Engineer junior is someone who is required for those 2 months. And you get the logic, right? And UI UX person, someone who shows up and do things for 3,000 for 2 months. Over here, a cutscene sequencer guy can only work in the circumstances where he would produce all of that stuff with all of the content being done, animations being done. He needs to have the maximum inventory, really, but he also needs to do all of the direction work. And I think that that's the last 3 months. And that's someone who probably gonna cost us another 15, I don't know, like I'd say that there is a preparation work, and then he's actually working for a couple of months, so we would do it this way. I've taken these numbers completely out of reasonable common sense thinking. I don't know what exactly we're talking about, because this is not finalized roster, you know, like, but this is what we do, right? And artist junior, is someone whom we need through almost all of the way. We'll spend the months to find the guy, and we would be paying him 2,000 just for helping with stuff and doing like a bunch of integration. And when he doesn't have work, he's testing stuff. Mockup would be done for, let's say, 10,000 somewhere here. Somewhere here, we'll understand we'll actually need to fix something because we dropped the ball a couple of times. And then we'll get to the final content. I don't know what we do with the content, probably, which is subscribe for Kit Bash for an annual subscription for $600, so we're fine. And then somewhere over here, we understand we need to spend another $500 for additional contract from the fab from the Unreal Engine store. And then they can be other things that we want to license or to buy, but we don't know. So what we do, we're gonna say that it's gonna be interim budget, which goes for right, and because we know we're living in the real world, we gotta say that some things will go wrong, and so we need a contingency, which would be I don't know. I mean, like live shows, that it probably would be 20. Oops. Like 20%. And so, like with this calculation, we presume that budget is for this specific thing in this logics again would be we're looking at like $131,000 and $500,020. So, like, why are we doing that, right? Means like like I said, like look at this and look at this and see, like how it get filled gradually depending from what should be done. Some mistakes, these mistakes should be corrected because again, especially when you have a high level of management on resources at the beginning of every company, you are not really constrained by employment obligations for people who haven't joined for the linear production. You need to try to save money. You need to try to understand, because again, a lot of the stuff that you do at this point is a hypothesis. When you build a vertical slice, you will understand that some things will go wrong. This is why we have the contingency. We also understand that, and by all means, this is not how much this whole thing costs. This is just an example. I would say that if you want to build a vertical slice for a decently looking Unreal Engine third-person adventure for 15 minutes, you probably want to look at the $600,000 to $800,000. Or if you're super smart and you're super efficient and you can do things with a lot of experience being invested in it, you probably can get away with a 300 to 400. But it all depends from where you're located as well, and it really depends on how do you approach the whole thing from the point of view of the variety of content. And a couple of other elements. But again, I mean, like, we're putting this example just to show the methodologies and to show how do you approach this whole thing. So coming back to this, we got our elements being mapped out and dissected. We have the feature set, we have inventory. It really allowed us to build the plan. And budget. And now the last thing which is essential at the stage when you look down at all of these elements, you need to also take into consideration a couple of things. So, and the things is that some of these documents are internal, some of these documents are external. You need to start to treating them this way, and these documents will get different amounts of attention internally and externally if you will show anything externally. So initial concept is something that's gonna change after you go through all of that stuff, and I've been very optimistic through all of our discussion. Mind that in a lot of this conversation you will actually have reality checks. You'll get to the point where you discuss something like some of the features, like over here with your engineer, and he just says that given the 6 months we have and the budget we're running, 150,000 we just cannot do it. And then you will have to talk about, can we somehow do that as a test with the sticks and shit, and somehow we can maybe show it as a separate video. Can we show that we're working on it, or do we need to deprecate it 100%? And depending from the conversation, it can go any way. But when you do, you would need to think to feelers to the composition and how not to worsen the impression of the game, despite the reality really putting sticks into your wheels, right? In some circumstances, it would be where you want to have 4 NPC characters for the demo, and in a discussion on the vertical slice, you come to the consensus that you actually can do only male ones, because you can use only male skeleton. You can get away with only 1 set of animations, and you would have 2 variation of dredges, dredge officer, and 1 unique boss. And this unique can be a female, whatever, like if you want to do that. So you do 1 skeleton plus 1 boss skeleton, because you cannot sacrifice the boss fight. But accommodate yourself to the thought that building effective and optimal production is a constant fight in a compromise for a quality you can afford and you can smartly get with what you have. And it's helpful. It's really a healthy way to think about it. Whatever money you would have, if your logic is flawed, if you cannot work with optimization, if you cannot work with the idea of making things optimal, you will spend all of this money without getting to any of the result. And it's there is zero difference if you would be provided with $1 million investment or $100 million investment. You will just burn it through, because to get to the result, you need to be rational and you need to be pragmatic, and you need to understand that production do not presumes opinionation at all. Production is like science. Production is based on facts. It's not based on confidence of people, on opinions of people, of what people want to happen. Production is real. It's like the real world, and as any real world, like as any reality, you would be as much successful as you prepare yourself. It would be and how real, how you're looking at the things being realistic, and how do you take the reality and like as something that surrounds you as something real. And it's extremely important to understand that. And if I would want to say something last here, it's make sure that all of the work that you have done with all of the documents, with the content inventory, feature set, description of your overall global pipeline and optimization of your pipeline and the end, because one of the things that you would need to build as well from all of these elements of the pipeline is effectively point A to the point Z, how you build this whole thing, and how all of this content and features and other elements getting into the larger entities like the characters, and then they get into the build, and this build is playable, the controls, and then you provide the feedback, and this feedback can be attended to different parts of the pipeline where you can put it in and make your content and your stuff better, and through these iterations get to the results that you want to produce. So by that we are concluding. Make sure that you will get your essential documents like the concept doc and provide it with a lot of hyperlinks to deeper documents for convenience of people who want to go deeper into the things and who want to read a little bit more into details. And don't really show anyone your internal documentation unless people ask, because they're not interested. No external person is really interested into the inventory of your project. And how many materials and maps your models have on the prop side. That's just not relevant. And on that, we're coming to the point where you are ready to start developing the vertical slice for a bunch of stages. You have all of the parameters figured out for yourself, with some degree of reason into that. You did the best what you can, and on the next week we will discuss because I changed things a little bit. We will discuss actually pre-production packaging, because like I put this one into this to think. B. So we'll do it this way, I would say. Oh, damn it. What is going on? And here, we would do vertical slice production. And here, we would do iteration of adjustment. And talk about adjusting before the actualization of materials, before we go into the final package, before the production, and as well, what and how do you do with your vertical slice? Where's results? So, kind of that. Again, I hope it was useful. We are almost here for 2 hours. I'm super happy to answer questions if anyone have any. Otherwise, write them to the comments. Damn it, that's been exhausting. So, yeah, here I am. It would be flickering. I don't know like what's going on with it. I think it's a video card, so I need to come back with my computer, or reinstalling OBS didn't help. But yeah, no, so this is it. In chat we had today Ivan Budarkevich, Vanya, привет, Скобар, Алексей Руденко, Антон Огнев, Алексей Бубнов, Mr. Smith, Sergey Golbev, Kelford, Hunter Antos, thank you very much for attending. Just reminding that tomorrow we have a talk, just right, not tomorrow, I think like it gonna be at Sunday. We're gonna have talk about just everything in general, and then next week we will go to pre-production packaging, and at the same time vertical slice production. I think I will combine these two. So see, we're adjusting things as we go. But I hope that's useful for you guys. Don't hesitate to ask questions, and do your preparations well. Do your planning well. Don't get lazy. The difference in between proper estimation of efforts and inventorization, when you have your vertical slice document and you do the storyboards, let's say for 60 shots, and proper disassembling of the shots is something that you should do with an utter attention and being really rigorous about it. It's because like if you will miss on those elements, it will catch up with you, and it will affect all of the further steps down the line. If there is one thing you need to know about the pipelines in general, I would say that mistakes being done early into the pipeline has the tendency to escalate into much more of a larger issues and turn into a systemic crisis or crisis in general if that's been done critically wrong. So don't do these mistakes. Be well, be diligent, love to work diligently, and we'll continue talking about this subject on the next week. Cheers and talk to you. Bye.